Welcome to this explainer. If you've been keeping an eye on the corporate landscape recently, especially within Philippine business, you know there's this massive, unseen tectonic shift happening literally right beneath our feet. We're seeing a sweeping transformation in how businesses actually operate, and it's being driven largely by new pressures from global supply chains and some pretty strict foreign investor requirements. It's a total reimagining of corporate responsibility. And surprisingly, most people haven't even noticed it's happening. So today, we're going to map out exactly what's going on by looking at the strategic evolution from CSR to ESG and why catching up to this reality is absolutely vital for survival. Okay, let's dive right into this. Part 1, the Great Business Shift. So there's a shift happening. Right now, the ground rules for Philippine business are completely changing. We're actively moving away from an era dominated by corporate social responsibility, CSR, and we are entering the era of ESG. And honestly, the sheer urgency and scale of this transition, it's kind of hard to overstate. It is completely rewiring corporate DNA as we speak. And when we talk about rewiring DNA, we aren't just talking about, updating a mission statement on a website. We're talking about fundamentally changing global supply chains, rethinking hiring practices from the ground up, and totally overhauling how raw materials are sourced. Entire operational frameworks are literally being dismantled and rebuilt to meet these entirely new standards of accountability. Which brings us to a really critical question to kick things off. Why are most companies completely missing it? Seriously, if this shift is so profound, why is it just flying under the radar for so many executives? I want you to think about your own company right now, or maybe the companies you invest in, or even just the brands you buy from every single day. Are they trapped in an old paradigm? Are they suffering from a debilitating corporate blind spot? Often, companies miss the turning tide simply because they're way too comfortable with what worked yesterday. So let's unpack exactly why this is happening by looking back at where we came from. Moving on to part 2, 3 decades of CSR. 30. For the past 3 decades, 30 whole years, corporate social responsibility has been the absolute default mindset for Philippine companies. I mean, if you were a successful business, the expectation was straightforward and pretty universally accepted. You give back to the community. That was the gold standard for corporate citizenship for a very long time. And there's a really clear reason why it was the standard, right? It was an incredibly effective way to build brand loyalty and foster goodwill without ever actually having to change your core product or alter your underlying business model. You could run a highly profitable, traditional operation Monday through Friday and then go do your charity work on the weekend. In practice, this looked exactly like the classic CSR playbook: planting trees, funding scholarships, running medical missions. Now, I want to be super clear here, and it's absolutely crucial we acknowledge this. These things matter. They genuinely do. Providing scholarships and medical care literally changes lives and uplifts entire communities. But if we really analyze this approach, the tree planting, the scholarships, the medical missions, we see a distinct pattern. It's a pattern of external charity. It's an outward expression of goodwill that operates entirely separate from the actual money-making operations. The business makes its revenue in one silo and then dispenses a fraction of those profits into a totally different charitable silo. Let's move to part 3 and see how this builds. The world moved on. Because the hard reality we have to face is that the world has moved on. The market, the environment, the global economy. It has all evolved at a breakneck pace. And this means that relying solely on external goodwill and charity, it's just no longer enough to be considered a responsible company. Why did the world move on? Well, it's driven by undeniable business forces. We're talking about the escalating operational impacts of climate change, the radical transparency brought about by social media, and shifting consumer demands for real, actual accountability. People today can see exactly how a product is made. The old playbook simply doesn't cover the new risks and realities businesses face right now. This is a massive wake-up call for any leadership team that's still just resting on the laurels of their charity work. So the crucial point is how we define this new era. ESG, environmental, social, and governance, is not about giving back. It is about how you operate your business. Really let that sink in for a second. This is a core, internal, operational standard. It's no longer about what you do with your leftover profits at the end of the year. It's about how you make your profits in the very first place. Tangibly, what does that mean? It means looking at environmental factors, like implementing rigorous carbon tracking across your entire logistics network. It means focusing on social elements, ensuring fair living wages and safe conditions for every single factory worker. And it demands strict governance, having true board transparency and ethical auditing. That is what how you operate actually means in practice. Let's head into part 4, CSR versus ESG.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core difference. Let's systematically dismantle the myth that CSR and ESG are just two different acronyms for the exact same thing. They're not. CSR asks, what are we doing for the community? It inherently looks outward. It's philanthropic. But ESG? ESG asks, how are we running this company? It looks inward. It examines the very engine of the business itself, probing into the mechanics of day-to-day operations. One is essentially an external bandage. The other is a holistic internal health check. When you ask what you're doing for the community, you're primarily thinking about public relations. But when you ask how you're running the company, you're thinking about long-term sustainability and systemic risk.
Furthermore, consider the structural difference here. CSR is a program. ESG is a strategy. Think about the massive leap in scale for a moment. A program is a standalone, compartmentalized initiative. It has a start date, an end date, and a very specific limited scope, like, say, a one-off coastal cleanup. But a strategy is fully integrated. It dictates the entire direction and operational flow of the business entity. It's the difference between ending a 6-month recycling program and implementing a 10-year business plan that completely eliminates single-use plastics from your entire manufacturing process. It's an immense leap from a well-intentioned side project to the core mission of the enterprise. Because of that immense difference in scale, they live in very different places within a company's hierarchy. CSR lives in your communications budget. ESG lives in your boardroom. It's actually kind of funny when you think about it. Your PR teams and your CEO usually have very different definitions of a good day. A communications budget is all about managing reputation, creating good press, and fostering immediate goodwill with the public. But the boardroom is concerned with financial viability, risk management, capital allocation, and making sure the company actually survives the next 20 years. That strategic, high-stakes environment is exactly where ESG sits. The reporting audiences couldn't be more different either. CSR is generally reported in an annual community relations update, which is basically a glossy brochure telling the neighborhood what nice things you did this year. But ESG is an entirely different ballgame. ESG is reported to a crucial trio: investors, clients, and regulators. These are the heavy hitters who hold the keys to your business's future, and they demand hard, auditable data. Investors want to know their money is safe from climate risks, clients demand sustainable supply chains, and regulators are setting strict new rules. And finally, there's the reality of compliance. CSR is entirely voluntary. You do it if you feel like it. ESG is increasingly mandatory. It is shifting from a nice-to-have to the law, the rule, and the strict requirement to even participate in the modern market. Which brings us to a final, pretty provocative thought I want you to take away from this explainer today. Ask yourself, is your company just giving back? Or are you changing how you operate? It's absolutely a vital question for any boardroom survival strategy today. Because if you're only focusing on giving back, well, you're playing by the rules of 30 years ago, and you're leaving your business incredibly vulnerable to the realities of tomorrow. The great business shift is already here. How you operate internally is exactly what will define your future viability, secure your investments, and keep you relevant in a rapidly evolving world. Thank you so much for joining me. I really hope this structured look at the source material has brought some clarity to this sweeping transformation, and I highly encourage you to go take a close look at your own organization strategy today.